Thank you all for coming. Um, the title of the session actually is taken from an article I wrote about Dr. Devy last year. And Dr. Devy, I think, is sort of the embodiment of multilingualism in India right now. He is the author and sort of conceptualizer of the People's Linguistic Survey of India. And the person to my extreme left, Deepa, who works with the sort of nuts and bolts of language on a daily basis as a translator, I think is also extremely well equipped to kind of talk about some of these themes. So I wanted to start with both of you maybe, and Deepa first, with sort of your memories of growing up multilingual in India. Because as we spoke yesterday, my theory is that all of us grow up in India being exposed to at least two languages. And it's a remarkable thing. It's something that's quite unusual especially when you travel in the West. It's quite unusual. So I want to kind of just pick your memories about what that was like and which languages you grew up hearing around you.
Thank you. I think that's one of the most amazing things about living in India, that what you mentioned, that we speak at least two languages, if not more. And we have usually a working understanding of maybe 3 or 4 languages. And it was only recently that I realized, I was born and raised in Kodagu. It's a tiny little, and I grew up in Madikeri. It's a tiny town of, I think, about 40,000 people, which in India is tiny, of course. And I realized that there are 10 languages that I can hear. I have experience of 10 languages just within Madikeri town itself. And that's amazing. So I grew up speaking Kannada. That's my mother tongue. But I also have the experience of living in Havyaka, which is a dialect of Kannada spoken by a certain community in the coastal part of Karnataka. And then there's, of course, Kodava, which is one of the local languages, and so on. So this, and obviously once I studied in an English medium school, like I'm sure many of us here, so then you learn English, and because Kannada has a 3-language education policy, we also learn Hindi, and Tulu, because my mother is from the coastal part of Karnataka. And so these things are very common experiences, and I think so common that we really take it for granted. And it's only when I started traveling outside of India, I realized that this is not a common experience at all. People are baffled to, first of all, know that there are more than 2 languages in this country. And we were talking about this yesterday, just one small anecdote. So I have a friend who's based in London right now, and she's a writer, and she was asking her literary agent to try and sell her book in the South Asian market. And he apparently asked her if the book needed to be translated into Indian first. And this was a thing about 1 year ago. It was not back in the day when these things were uncommon. So it is baffling that these experiences that we take so much for granted is unknown outside of this country. So I think, and that also informs, again, I'm sure a lot of us know the fact that the more languages you know, the more ways you have of seeing the world and describing the world and understanding the world. And the more personalities we embody. Because I think when I speak in Kannada, I'm almost a different person. When I speak in English, it's a different, and we kind of have different tones and expressions and the little things we do, gestures that we kind of embody when we speak a different language. And it's so amazing how rich our inner lives become when we know more than 1 or 2 languages.
Dr. Devy, I know a little bit of your story of growing up and exposure to at least 3 languages and maybe more in school. Can you tell us a little bit about your childhood?
I always thought you're a very intelligent person. But what makes you believe that I have grown up? See, my dearest friend, Mahashweta Devi, may her soul dwell in peace. Every time she met me and saw me, she used to say, Ganesh, grow up. So she convinced me that I have not managed that. But assuming that your assumption is right, my parents spoke Gujarati, but it was not the kind of Gujarati that is spoken in Gujarat. Because I have a very strange ancestry, which language ancestry, which goes back to a branch of Indo-Aryan, which did not touch India, but went into China. It's called Tokrian. It disappeared there after the 11th century, and some of the people migrated south from Central Asia to Rajasthan, then Gujarat, and my ancestors belong to that. So they spoke a non-Gujarati Gujarati to begin with. I mean, everything I done is unlicensed in this life, without. So this was unlicensed Gujarati that was spoken at home. I grew up in a small village in Maharashtra, where the Marathi spoken was not accepted by Pune Marathi speakers as Marathi. So the second unlicensed language I acquired was Marathi. The third was Hindi, but that was by stealth. We had a traveling theater, cinema theater, which used to pitch its tent in our village, and I saw some Hindi films, Chalti Ka Naam Gaadi, and I liked Kishore Kumar dancing, and so I picked up a little bit of Hindi. But the first time I visited the north, the north, I realized that the Hindi I knew was not the Hindi they know. So that was the third one. The fourth was English, which came to me with great difficulty because I was from a village and I started learning English very, very late in life. And finally, I managed it. And actually, I can't believe it, I got a PhD in English. But when I went to England after that to study in a British university, I went to Yorkshire, and the lady who was cleaning the house spoke what she thought was English, and I couldn't understand a word of it. So I thought mine was unlicensed English. So these three unlicensed languages I had. Therefore, I got interested in such languages which are not standard. And I'm glad you mentioned Kannada, because I believe that nobody speaks Kannada at home. They speak their own variety of Kannada. Kannada is spoken only when you are with gentle folk or you are writing something. So this is a diglossic language, and therefore various varieties of Kannada actually claim to be Kannada, which they are strictly speaking not. Then I started work with Adivasis in Gujarat. I got interested in languages, the names of which are removed from the government records. I just love the languages and the people who are neglected or ignored by the government, because they have worldview. It is you asked her about the worldviews. They have worldview which allows you to see the stars while you are asleep you are sleeping lying on ground, and therefore you see the stars where they are, and not the way the government presents them. Thank you.
What is, Deepa mentioned.
So I learned 12 tribal languages, and I speak them as much as they speak those languages, but none of them are standardized languages. And therefore, each of the small tribal language, Adivasi language, has many varieties, vying for getting, claiming as the Billi, the Gondi, the Santali, and so on. So actually, I am now 75. Now, please don't tell anybody. I don't think I've spoken a language. I think I spent 75 years speaking only dialects.
What do you think, speaking all these different languages or dialects, as you call them, what has that done? What does that do for us as individuals or as a society? And I don't mean the obvious things, which includes, you can read more books, or you can talk to more people. What does it do for us, both individually and collectively, in terms of how we think, and how does it enrich us?
Well, learn from India. I'll tell you why. I mean, nobody say, I'm not saying learn from ancient India, because that's something gone. And I don't have much of an access, not much love for it. But uh, when India was made a nation, it accepted to be multilingual. In the Constituent Assembly, they debated. Somebody suggested Sanskrit be made the national language. That was vetoed out. So the Constituent Assembly accepted 14 languages as the main languages, scheduled languages. It was not enough. They actually enacted that and created linguistic states. When we had so many princely kingdoms, and then also the British made districts, and it was quite a territorial khichdi when India emerged into independence. So the government appointed in the early 50s a linguistic state reorganization commission, and states were created for different languages, for their histories, for their identities, and so on. And despite having so many languages, uh, the country has still remained one. And I hope it does for us quite some time to come. Besides, when the first census, the first census after the linguistic reorganization was published, Jawaharlal Nehru was very unhappy that smaller languages in a language state will get affected, because he made a very famous speech in August 1958 saying that linguistic states must take care of smaller languages more than the main language. So in the first census after the linguistic reorganization, the list of mother tongues had exactly 1,652 names of mother tongues. Still there were complaints that some mother tongues were left out. If Indians have such great enthusiasm for claiming their languages, continuing their languages, even if they have no schools, no colleges, no governments, still stick to their languages, I think there is something to learn from India. And that is the worldview, that you must have many worldviews in order to be civilized. Thank you.
To be devil's advocate here, there are societies out there who have a language, and we might still call them civilized. Maybe not in the 21st century, I don't know. But
Wait, sorry to interrupt. It's not good, but the a people that think, a people who think that a language can make a civilization use that language for dominating others, for imperialism, for civilizing others, like the British said to us, we are here to civilize you. But people who, who claim many worldviews as theirs, they are innately civilized. That's the difference.
Right.
To use civilization as a beating stick and to use civilization as a walking stick are two different things.
Right.
We have multilingual India as Gandhi had his walking stick, and we are walking like Gandhi with so much of diversity. Thank you.
Deepa, I want to ask you, this thing we alluded to earlier, which is that each language has its own way of seeing the world, its own particular contextual history and culture, frameworks of thoughts and ideas. And I think as a translator, part of your job is not only to translate the words literally, but also to work with these ideas and, bring one into the world of the other. How does that work for you? I mean, can you give us some examples of just the practical difficulties of doing something like this?
I think it was A.K. Ramanujam who said the only, and I paraphrase here, he said the only way we can translate anything is first to understand the impossibility of translating anything. Because that's not, I think it's about understanding how any two languages work. And in my case, I translate from Kannada to English, two languages as different as they could be. And again, and language is again not about just the meaning of the words, right? Language is so much more. Languages are memory. It's our stories from our past. It is our culture, our music, our food. There's so much that goes into the idea of language. And when you translate any text, you also need to translate the entirety of living in a linguistic culture in that way. And there are, so for me, my choices when it comes to translation is to not get as close to English as possible. Instead, I want to rather take the linguistic culture that to me is in Kannada and to take it as close to English as possible. So one of the examples I always like to go back to is in Kannada there is a saying that Durada Betta Nunnige. And the closest, almost the exact same, what it means is the grass is greener on the other side. But when and that's the choice that a lot of my editors would prefer I make. Because it's just easy to understand and, but that's not why we translate at all. I would rather tell someone that the distant mountain is smooth. It's a very loose translation. Instead of saying, it means the same, but it is not the same as saying the grass is greener on the other side. Yeah. So when I make choices like that, I'm choosing to tell the reader in English that this is how we interpret this idea in the Kannada language. And this is the way we see the world, not as the grass is greener on the other side, but that the distant mountain is smooth. It's not difficult to climb.
Yeah, I mean, the grass is green on the other side suggests a kind of very, first of all, Western construct where you have grass on either sides of fences.
Exactly.
And you can look over and see that the grass there is greener and so on.
Yeah.
But it's not something that comes naturally to us. Whereas this suggests something a little bit more sort of bound to the terrain, the natural terrain, right?
Exactly.
And so there's a transposition of culture as well as language.
I'm sure there must be something equivalent that's used by people living along the coast where they don't see mountains. But I can't immediately think of what that might be. But I personally find these...
It is like what Russians say, Trump is better than Putin.
Yeah. G and Devy's stand-up career will begin soon. I wanted to ask you, I mean, you kind of alluded to this a little bit, Dr. Devy, by talking about both the process of writing the Constitution and then the Linguistic Reorganization Committee. Insofar as this goes, India's quite unique, I think, as an experiment in a big state that was always meant to be multilingual in two ways. One is, of course, the acknowledgement that it will and always be multilingual. But the second is that you have to deal with this multiplicity of languages without erasure of some as far as possible, without dominance of others as far as possible. And here we are now, 80 years, almost 80 years post-independence. And here you are now having completed the People's Linguistic Survey. How do you think this experiment has gone?
Well, I think the experiment of India has succeeded. The experiment of the People's Linguistic Survey has failed. I'll tell you why.
Has failed?
Yeah. A successful experiment always nudges you to begin another experiment. And we seem to have arrived at a point in time, where people in India become very restless. That what we have produced as a desired system of representatives taking our woes and problems to the parliament, we seem to have run out of that. We also seen how money has corrupted politics, how non-state actors are running governments today, how people who could have been close to fashion designing are designing our policies. So in that sense, all this unhappiness, it may not translate into votes in the parliament, but certainly it translates into desire to create something new and different. With People's Linguistic Survey of India, I did the count with so many others, nearly 3,000 persons. Once that count was done, and details were written, and those 35,000 pages were printed. The education minister called me and he thanked me. He said, "We wanted to do it, but you have done it. That's great." So the government got scot free. I slaved like a donkey. And so my experiment was to make the government accountable. Rather, they said if people are doing their work, let people do their work. Like, in some fashionable English societies, they said, we live life, the others, kind of do our work. So my experiment failed. My experiment should have created an explosion actually.
But what about the experiment of multilingual India, the multilingualism
Multilingual
of
India.
India?
Well, once the name of that language is in print, a record is created, that record will remain there. I mean, say 500 or 1000 years from now, if people are still using language, and I doubt if that will be so. But if they also know a thing called reading, and I doubt if they will know so, and they have the desire to open a book, which of course, not in too distant a future, will be gone. I mean, all of us feel completely, depressed by that thought. But if after many decades or centuries somebody decides to open these volumes and sees that these many languages or dialects existed, they might actually whisper in some other years that India had so many 700-800 languages which were alive. Like in Greek myth, uh, there is a character that has long ears who's covering the ears with, the name. But somebody whispers, and then the reeds, as the wind passes, spreads that message. So in future, these human reeds, as the wind, as the air passes through, will whisper that India had so many languages, and that was a glorious India. I think after Bhakti period, this multilingual India will become another period known in history as a glorious period of Indian culture. They may not call it a civilization because that term civilization will remain nailed to only the Vedic and the Sanskrit. But this will be remembered. Uh, I, Samanth, I don't know if I have ever wanted to see whether this experiment failed or succeeded because it had to be done. And I just don't know. You paint something, and if somebody says, "Did you succeed or not?" You won't be able to say anything. Maybe some auctioneer will, in an auction, that painting might get very good price, or it might get relegated to trash. It might end up in a museum, popular museum, here, even here. So I don't know if People's Linguistic Survey succeeded or not, but I think India as an experiment has succeeded because for the first time, the experiment of India after 1947, particularly after 1949, November 1949, made all Indians equal. I want to say this on to this evening, which is about 33 years back, the time when we learnt on television that the mosque was being destroyed. I want to say this: the Constitution made us equal, whether you are Muslim, Christian, Hindu, whatever. I think the Constitution is still around, and so long as it is there, even as a rumor, even as a concealed object, the experiment of India has succeeded. When it's not, some people, if you are abducted,
Which may well be the case after this
no,
panel. Yeah.
still, you still exist. You continue to exist. I think India shall exist, and India shall become more better. I am an optimist, and I think we will have a better tomorrow because we have been who we have been. People's Linguistic Survey is a minor thing. Uh, let's forget it. Thank you.
I mean, multilingual India exists. India exists. India as an experiment has succeeded. Um, But Deepa, you and I were talking yesterday about possibly one of the biggest challenges to this idea of multilingual India has come over the last 10 years, let's say, in the attempt to, if not impose a particular language, at least elevate one particular language or one language and its culture over others. And I want you to give me sort of your perspective of this as somebody who deals with language on a day-to-day basis, like sort of how you have seen this unfold and where we are at now.
Right. I I want to, echo what Dr. Devi said and say I'm I'm an optimist because I don't think we have an option not to be one. And we were talking about how last night we were talking about how there are families which have decided to adopt English as their mother tongue for various reasons. Maybe they are a third language child, they're bringing up a third language child where the father speaks a different language and the mother speaks a different language. So what is common to them is English and the child grows up with only one language. But at the same time, it's so interesting to me to see how towns and cities which are outside of our state capitals use language, which is why I love traveling to North Karnataka. And what Dr. Devi was saying was, how there are very many different kinds of Kannadas. And the Kannada that is spoken in, let's say, Dharwad or even further up north, Gulbarga and Bidar is so different that sometimes I don't understand it myself. I can kind of get the gist, but not really, not really follow what they're saying. So I think we tend to look at where language politics is, where all the challenges of language use are, and we tend to look at it from a very city-centric view. So Bangalore is not Karnataka, and Chennai is not Tamil Nadu, and whatever, the state capitals are not the entirety of the state. So I think the way we...
You're saying it in Bangalore, please be cautious.
Yeah. So the way we, I think, have to think about language is also to look at how language is being used outside of these cultural power centers. Just to go back to the literature in Kannada, I say this. I strongly believe that some of the best work contemporarily that's coming out of Kannada is happening not in these traditional power centers of Bangalore, Mysore, Mangalore. Instead, it's happening in the northern parts of Karnataka, which again, there is this hierarchy of Kannadas. There is the North Karnataka Kannada barely gets any mention, and even today in popular culture, it gets caricatured as this funny thing that people say, and it's this languages of abuse, and so there is no due respect given to the nuances of these different Kannadas. So I think the way we think about how any language is being used is to look outside of these traditional cultural power centers, and that's what makes me an optimist, and that's what keeps me hopeful of maintaining this multilinguality, at least to a certain extent. Yes, of course, technology is a big problem, but...
Yeah, we'll come to technology, but I did also want to, I didn't mention the name of the language, but I will just say it. It's Hindi.
Yes.
And sort of the political role that Hindi kind of plays in our day-to-day lives, especially for people who live in Karnataka and Bangalore in particular, as it has for me when I was living in Tamil Nadu. I think it's a very charged role that Hindi has taken on over the last 10 years. And I wonder sort of what threat that poses to this successful multilingual experiment that Dr. Devy outlined.
Well, Hindi was claimed the last time in the 2018 statistics of the government of India by the government as being spoken by 52 crores. But if you look at the small print there, you find that so many other languages have been pushed into the basket of Hindi. And if you take them out, for instance, Bhojpuri, which is not Hindi. Bhojpuri is far more ancient than Hindi is. When Bhojpuri goes back to, read Peggy Mohan, father tongue, motherland or something, goes to 3,000 years. Hindi is hardly a few centuries. So if you take all those other languages out, then the total number of Hindi is 38 crores, speakers is 38 crores. So 14 crores have been pushed into that. That's the government pressure. But uh, I, I think Hindi speakers themselves don't want to impose Hindi on any other language. It is a political party that is looking at some large slice of the Indian cake, voters' cake, that is creating this Hindi mania and Hindi phobia. Uh, I think if you leave people to themselves, people in India have, I'm sure Deepa will agree. Indian consciousness is a translating consciousness. We are primarily translators and occasionally writers. No, no. Everybody speaks two, three, four languages. At least if you don't, you tolerate other languages being spoken. You do not feel that you entered some uncivilized world as, as a British gentleman, not now, but in times when migration was not so common. If they heard a word from a dialect, they used to feel very disturbed. I mean, think of Pygmalion.
Yeah.
Actually, that's where we had lunch the other day.
Yes.
Where place about which Shaw wrote the first scene. That's where we were having lunch, and we were speaking the kind of English which Shaw's, the linguist in Shaw's play would never have accepted as English. But he is writing for New York, and I also got my salary as professor of English at one time, actually. So we are a translating nation. Most of our literary traditions in modern languages begin with translations. In Marathi, Jnaneshwar translated the Gita into Marathi, the first major writer. Here in Kannada, it is a translations of Mahabharata
Pampa.
and Pampa. That is, in Gujarat, the Gujarati language begins with Hemachandracharya, who wrote a manual for translators. So, Tulsidas, I mean, the great Hindi tradition begins with translation of Ramayana. So, and A.K. Ramanujan was absolutely right about it. You have two, three languages. We are a translating consciousness. No translation is final. We are also easy with poor translations. We accept, actually many Indian writers in Indian, writing in Indian languages, translate their own books in English, thinking that they too can become Tagore one day. So we are at ease with we don't think in terms of a existence in paradise from where you have fallen, and you are, as humans, you are fallen. So translation is not a fallen, from grace kind of work. Translation is the original in India. And I think that speaks for the multilingualism that we have. That speaks for the making of our nation as a multilingual nation. And that also speaks for our ability to resist by switching over to another language. The moment we see an undesired friend coming, then we whisper in a second language, कि ये तो परेशान करेंगे. And then we say, oh, how nice you come.
Okay, we have 8.5 minutes exactly.
Linguistic duplicity is a sign of higher intelligence. Only duds don't have, they remain monolingual in their anger as well as in their love.
Yeah.
But here, when you fall in love, a Marathi speaker falls in love, speaks Hindi songs. He or she does. And when we celebrate birthdays, we actually use some English, even if we don't know enough English. We say happy birthday to you, etc., etc. So we are easy with languages. The more languages, the merrier we are. Thank you so much.
Are there any questions in the audience? I think we may have mics, although yeah, there are mics. So I will leave it to the volunteers to pick.
My name is Siddharth. Thank you so much for the panel, for such an engaging conversation. There's an oft-quoted phrase that a dialect with an army becomes a language, right? And even after independence, I personally fully do not agree with
Actually, for us, a dialect with a translator becomes a language. That has been our history.
Correct.
And in any case, we are not very good with armies.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, but generally, like imposition of like even Persian came into Indian consciousness and seeped into so many languages, including Kannada, is because the rulers were Persian and all the court work used to be in Persian, and then English came and all. So it's a reality. My question, sir, is that even after independence, in the scheduled list, right? Such a large language spoken by so many people, like Rajasthani, which I belong to, and there are so many others, which did not find a mention, whereas something which is very close to Hindi, like Punjabi, came to be recognized. So what went then, especially from your research, that even some of the languages which are spoken by so many people and have a rich literature as well, did not become the scheduled language? Yeah.
Question to me? Yeah. Tulu did not become a scheduled language. Kutchi in Gujarat did not become a scheduled language. In Meghalaya, Khasi and Garo did not become scheduled language. In Mizoram, Mizo did not become scheduled language. Because their problem was there was a chorus in the Constituent Assembly asking for a single language. They were the more saner people in the Constituent Assembly were fighting against this monolingual idea of nationalism, because they had seen very clearly what happened to the 19th century monolingual nationalism in Germany, in unification of Germany, and in Italy. They both became in the 20th century fascist countries. Mark my words. If India persists on its, some Indians persist on their path of asking India become a monolingual nation, in reality or in idea, it will be permanently a fascist nation, or even beginning of fascism can be in demand for monolingualism. As far as dialects are concerned, you know, in my village there was a river, and I always thought that the current of the stream is the dialect, and the river banks are the standard language. So dialects keep flowing, languages put frameworks on them, then dialects rebel against those languages sometimes, flow in some different direction. So dialects mark the life of a language. Armies, actually, I don't know, we have this, what is it called, 5-year soldier?
Agniveer.
Agniveers don't make a language, whether dialect or not. Agniveers only make two early retired sad persons. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yeah, there's one over here.
Hi. Good evening, panel. This is Atul here, right over here. This is a question for ma'am. Thanks, first of all, for all your insights. Basically, I just wanted to understand what can be done in Bangalore or in Karnataka as a whole for the people who are not from India. They can learn Kannada better in a different way, except for imposing the language in the school, which what I have found is that it's not working in many of the cases, I can say, right? I mean, kids are having just probably 40-45 minutes in one period, in probably twice a week. They don't speak that language among their friends. They don't speak their language at home, in their neighborhood, none, at no places at all. What else can be done? I mean, we all want to know the language, right? I mean, I'm at least done with saying Kannada Gotila. I don't like it at all. But I want to learn, but there are not many avenues, not even in offices. Is there any way we can probably do something different, in some different way to spread this awareness? Probably, I don't know what can be done. Looking for insights. Thank you.
Sure. I mean, I don't know how fair it is to say an institution or a government has to create a policy, because I think end of the day it also comes down to individual effort. It's about when you, thank you. Because, you know, if Kannada is the language that you're trying to learn, watch movies or listen to Kannada music or things like that, because I think we best learn languages. I have no connection to Malayalam except via its literature in translation, or, you know, its films, or that's how I learned Tamil as well. I mean, I'm not fluent, of course, but it just comes down to, you know, how interested we are. And I firmly believe that if you're living in a state where there is a predominant language, in Karnataka, of course, that's Kannada, it is basic courtesy to know at least a few words. I don't think I don't think anyone is asking for fluency here. I don't think anyone is asking you to speak classical Kannada or be able to quote Pampa or Kuempu. I can't do that myself, being a Kannada speaker. But basic courtesy is just showing respect for the land where you're living and making a living out of, or just spending your life. So I think it just comes down to that as well, right?
We have time for one more question over here. Yeah.
Good evening, Samanth sir, Devy sir, and Deepa ma'am. My question is more of out of a curiosity. When I was a child, it's now since everybody here has established, every person in India at least can speak two or more languages. So, what do you think the effect is on, like, does one language lead to the certain aspects of other language getting silenced? For example, since my childhood, everybody in my home says turn the switch on in Malayalam, but they haven't used that particular word for Malayalam, which I still don't know, and I hope anybody here can enlighten me. And I feel like that's the case with many other languages, and this is one of the few examples. So do you think knowing more languages is a consequence of getting this, that we are getting more comfortable with certain languages in certain words? And what do you think going forward, will more of these words as such get replaced, and what do you think the consequences will be?
This reminds me once of an article I wrote about a government committee that sits in Delhi and tries to, meets regularly and tries to find words for English, Hindi words for English terms. The idea is that they will publish these as dictionaries every so often, and the idle hope is that people will pick up these dictionaries and absorb all of these terms. France has something very similar. For example, France doesn't use email, they use courriel, which is like the word for email. Nobody actually uses it, but it's in a book somewhere. In Hindi, the only term I remember is there is for the word locomotive, these guys debated for a long time and finally came up with the term Lopat Gamini Agnirat. Nobody uses that. I can guarantee you even the most ardent Hindi nationalist will not use that. So I think, I'd love to hear what you say, but I think like a lot of this is just organic. It has to kind of fit into the way we speak and the way we think without tripping us up over the language itself.
Yeah, no, I think that's pushing it too far. Language need not be that complicated. On an everyday way, everyone uses different languages in various ways. And it is absolutely fine to use locomotive and not that long word you said. And to say that every single word that comes out of, whether in writing or in speech has to be from just one language alone. I think we're just complicating language too much and turning people away from choosing to engage with that language when we say it has to be pure Kannada
Exactly.
or pure
Yeah.
Hindi, or there is no purity in.
Yes.
We are in
Don't
politics
wor-
we are obsessed
worry
with
about-
purity anyway.
Don't worry about purity of a language. The more polluted language is, the richer it is. Please ask your parents to say not only Malayalam and then switch on. Say in Malayalam, using Malayalam verb, switch on more light, and then just add one Malayalam word, it becomes a Malayalam sentence.
We end Kannada words with oo, so it's bassu, karu, and that's Kannada there for you. Yeah.
Okay, on that note, unfortunately, we have a big red screen here saying time's up. Thank you so much to Deepa and Dr. Devy for joining us. Thank you all.
Thank you.